Welcome everybody to the third edition that we're doing the recaps here as we continue on the road to moving this series over to TEW9. But we start with the world title, which of course started with Goldberg starting in 2003 with the world title. He had the big cage match in January, then he had a rematch with Canyon at Super Brawl, which then that moved things on to the big feud with the Deadpool, which took much of Goldberg's year from here on, even though he first defended against Macias at Spring Break Bash in one of Macias' first huge matches. He had the babyface match versus Booker, which then ended with the return of the Deadpool after they were suspended for a month, and that led directly to the Vampiro Goldberg match at Slamboree, where Vampiro became the new world champion, and we'll go deeper a little into how that all got built up. But to be short, he won the world title, and then Vampiro, defended the title against guys like Rob Van Dam, Sean O'Hare as they started getting built up, and he had a big match against Chuck Palumbo, and that all led to the big arrival of Eddy Guerrero at the end of Clash of Champions 2003 over from the WWF. And that led to a big fall brawl match where Eddy Guerrero won a four-way over Canyon, Ravi D, and Scott Steiner to get a world title shot at Halloween Havoc, while the Deadpool were busy with War Games. And then Halloween Havoc, of course, Eddy Guerrero became the world champion for the first time in WCW, winning the title off Vampiro at Halloween Havoc, which led, and at the same pay-per-view, Canyon defeated Rob Van Dam in basically a number one contenders match, which set up a Starrcade main event. But first we had Eddy Guerrero versus Ric Flair in an untitled match at Mayhem, and that led to Starrcade, where Eddy Guerrero retained the title defeating Canyon in a really good match, and he's leaving the year as WCW World Champion, heading things into 2004. But in a lot of ways, the story outside the world title scene of WCW in 2003 was a story of the stables. The big three, Horsemen, Deadpool, which of course we'll go into deeper, and Helms Legacy, all were major parts of the division of the company. And as I noted, the Horsemen had their issues. They of course had lost the world title at the beginning of the year. They were no longer the tag team champions. But they went after things at the start of the year. Things were issues as Jeff Jarrett went after and Ric Flair went after Rey Mysterio's Junior US title and failed at winning that, which led to more and more tension. Of course, Canyon got the rematch, but lost cleanly to Goldberg. And then as the spring and summer continued, we had feuds with guys like Palumbo, O'Hare, Diamond Dallas Page before he left. And eventually, what we saw happening was more and more basically instability as Canyon kind of went on his own in a feud with guys like Rob Van Dam in the middle part of the year. Well, Ric Flair, Jarrett, and Douglas all had their own feuds in sort of like the mid card. But Ric Flair unfortunately had big feuds with up and comers like Sean O'Hare, who he did a job to at Great American Bash. Eventually, Canyon kind of made a comeback, getting a big win over Rey Mysterio Jr. at Bash at the Beach, while the rest of the stable was still having their own problems. And this all led to Fall Brawl, where it really did seem like the Horsemen were at their end, as they had failed again. Jeff Jarrett and Douglas failed at winning back the tag titles. But Ric Flair got on the big win over Alex Wright on the undercard, and then sort of had a big but then Flair got in his big winter feud with Chuck Palumbo, which ended at Starrcade as he had dropped basically twice. He lost to Palumbo at Halloween Havoc and at Starrcade. Well, of course, Canyon had beaten Rob Van Dam after fighting to a 30-minute draw earlier in the year at Halloween Havoc, but he lost the world title match. And Jeff Jarrett and Shane Douglas had their own issues, losing as part of the tag team turmoil. So as 2003 ends, the Horsemen are sort of at I wouldn't say a breaking point here, but they're sort of like at a decision point here. As of course, Canyon is still a top guy, but Flair, basically this is his third straight year. He lost to Ray Jr. in 2001. He lost to Rob Van Dam last year, and he lost to Chuck Palumbo this year. It's becoming a Starrcade division that Ric Flair puts over a young up-and-comer, and that's not doing great. And then Jarrett and Douglas, who were a top tag team last year, sort of like settled into just challenger status and cannot really do it. And there's more tension, plenty of botch interference, and more fun stuff like that. So we'll see how their 2004 goes. But if the Horsemen had their issues, of course, the Deadpool, I won't say were dominant, but they were one of the top, they're basically the top stable of the year. Of course, they continually went after the top bay faces like Booker, Goldberg, and others. This really started going full force at beginning with Spring Break Bash with Macias getting the world title shot. He, of course, lost by DQ when basically the Deadpool absolutely destroyed Goldberg with the babyfaces trying to save. The Deadpool then were basically suspended for a month, but they returned after Sacrifice to attack Goldberg and Booker T after after they had a babyface world title match, which sort of began Booker's long feud with the Deadpool throughout the year. Vampire, of course, won the title at Assembly, like I said, while Booker T fought with Macias, including Macias throwing him off the stage. More stuff. Rob Van Dam challenging for the title. Goldberg team with Jason Jett to go after Morningstar and Macias. Bash at the Beach was another world title event for Vampire going over Sean O'Haire. Well, Macias and Goldberg had their big match with Macias getting the win, and then there was a throne beatdown, continuing the build to the big, Survivor Series match. I mean, not Survivor Series, that's another company, the big Fall Brawl match. Of course, Booker T began his little mini feud with Morningstar at this point. Clash of Champions had Palumbo going for the world title. Well, Goldberg took on Morrissey and Lesset in a handicap match. And Macias fought Booker T in a Falls County over Texas Death match where Macias got the big win. There's a big Deadpool beatdown, but that's where Eddy Guerrero made his basic debut. At Fall Brawl, we had the big baby faces of Jet, London, Booker T, and Goldberg defeating Deadpool in the War Games match, but that doesn't mean things were actually over. At Havoc, as I noted, Guerrero won the title. Well, on the other card, Goldberg defeated Macias by DQ, and Morningstar defeated Booker T by DQ when basically Booker T went crazy with chair shots. Mayhem led to Vampire defeating Booker T by DQ in much the same way. Well, we had, Morningstar getting to the finals of the main tournament and almost winning it. And then at Starrcade, we had several big matches where Morningstar won over Jeff Hardy. Macias, lost to Goldberg in a big match. Vampire defeated Booker T and Rob Van Dam thanks to Booker and RVD not getting, basically having some miscommunication, which means Vampire ends the year as a number one contender once again, going after Eddy Guerrero. Well, Macias, has had a very dominant year despite losing to Goldberg, and Morningstar is a rising star defeating Jeff Hardy. And Lestat is there. Then move things on to the U.S. title scene. Road Mysterio Jr., of course, began the year as the U.S. champion, and he sort of did what you expect with that. He had the little beginning of the year feud with the Horsemen, including taking on Shane Douglas and Ric Flair. Jeff Jarrett, Shane Douglas, and Ric Flair made successful pay-per-views at the start of the year, but then Shane Helms would basically risen through the ranks and had his Helms legacy with the Gigantes and Silver Surfer Rollers. Won the U.S. title off Rey Mysterio Jr. at Sacrifice in April. He had a little mini feud, Helms defending the title against people like DDP, Kidman, and Palumbo, and then he had an open challenge on a Nitro in July 2003, which saw the debut of Jeff Hardy in WWE winning the U.S. title in his debut over Helms. Helms won the title back at Bash at the Beach a few days later, and then we had the basically rebuild of the feud between Rey Mysterio Jr. and Shane Helms. But we had a little side feud as Shane Helms defeated Sting at Fall Brawl, and then at Halloween Havoc, Rey Mysterio Jr. beat Shane Helms to retain the title, and then in a rematch, won it again, defending it at Starrcade in two great matches, into the better match of the year for WCW, and that's sort of the story of the year. Rey Jr. beginning the year as U.S. champion and then U.S. champion. But really, despite that, it was really Shane Helms' year as we had the rise of the Helms legacy. Gigantes, the former Wall, had a few with Scott Steiner in the year, and the Silver Surfer Rollers were a continued part of the tag team division, and they look to be one of the rising more, groups in WCW as 2004 begins. Of course, if we're talking about the tag division, there's three tag teams that were the dominant part of it, and that's America's Most Wanted, Air Raid, and the Hart Legacy of Teddy Hart and Jack Evans. Air Raid, of course, started the year as the tag team champions. They you had a couple defenses, all leading to America's Wanted actually winning the tag titles at Slamboree after there'd been a triple threat match involving them and Dustin Rhodes and Quinnen as bringing back Break Bash in March. NW held the tag titles for a few months, defeating Rey Mysterio Jr. and Alex Wright. A big triple threat involving Air Raid and Ginger and Stasiak, but then Air Raid won the tag team titles back at Clash of Champions in August, and then they defending the titles over Jared and Douglas, but in a sort of big match. Hart Legacy had debuted in the middle of the year and quickly rose, including a big win over Jared and Douglas in one of their first matches. Won the tag titles off of Air Raid at Halloween Havoc, but then at a match on Nitro, America's Most Wanted won the tag titles back via some shenanigans, which led to a AMW Hart Legacy match at Mayhem, which went to a DQ, and AMW basically, lost the match on purpose via DQ to keep the titles, which led to the first ever Assault of Anarchy, aka TLC match, where Arrayed won the tag titles for the third time, I believe, and, basically set their state as the, new best, tag team in the company. Or, no, this was actually their second reign, sorry. That's my bad. And yeah, I mean, there are other teams, like I said, Silver Rollers, Jim Dragon Stasiak, Darren Douglas had their moments, Roy Henry Jr., like I mentioned, but these were the three teams that were the core of the tag division throughout the year. And then there were the rising stars of the company. I included Rob Van Dam here just because, like, he was sort of like right at, like, the edge of the main event picture, always in big main event matches, getting world title matches, of course, feuding with Vampiro at the end of the year, taking on, Canyon had a big feud in the fall, they had a 30-minute draw, and then Canyon won in the rematch. But their big stories of the year were Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Haire, who, slowly, rose up the ranks. They were always still upper mid-carders by the end of 2002, but 2003 was really the year they made their statement. They, feuded with the Horsemen, with Deadpool. They both had world title matches in the summer. And then, as part of the fall, Chuck Palumbo got two huge wins over Ric Flair at Halloween Havoc and Starrcade, solidified himself as, like, possible future top guy. Well, Sean O'Haire, of course, was really the big guy. He got the world title shot at Clash of Champions, got very close to winning, but the big moment was, of course, at Mayhem 2003 November, where he won the call shot for a ladder match, and that was a world title opportunity anytime he wants. This also doesn't mention people like Billy Kidman, who eventually, as part of the Sean O'Haire's big feud in the fall, it looked like Lance Storm and Mike Awesome were breaking apart, so there was a big tag match of Kidman and Mike Awesome versus Lance Storm and O'Haire, and Lance Storm immediately turned on Sean O'Haire, forming the triumvirate of Billy Kidman, Lance Storm, and Mike Awesome, which led to Sean O'Haire and Mike Awesome's big Starrcade match, while Billy Kidman and Lance Storm teaming up won the tag team tournament match, winning a world tag team title shot as the new year begins. And then there's WCW Women's Division, which continue to be built up. Of course, Angel Fox, sort of shocked the world by winning an open challenge to win the belt on the first night of the year. She held the title until Sacrifice in April, where Lexia James, aka Mickey James, won the belt from her. She had a couple title offenses, but Angel Fox won the title back at Bash at the Beach. But that eventually led to Gail Kim winning the triple threat match in September, and this all led to a big fatal four-way, also involving Celine Cartier, aka Lufisto, where Celine Cartier won the title. And these four women were sort of the core of the division, along with women like Beth Phoenix, Jordan Cole, and even Amber O'Neal, who's currently part of the Helms Legacy as Cash's girlfriend. But, slowly but surely, a true women's division begins to rise, as we even have some decent matches throughout the year. But still, there's more to come. And then there's the Cruiserweight division, which, had its issues throughout the year, but, Morningstar started the year as champion, but he dropped the title to Paul London as part of the triple threat match. As for Bash in March, London had an impressive defense, winning a four-way, defeating Cash, defeating Kaz, but eventually Jamie Noble won the title at Bash at the Beach, and eventually Noble added Ebony Sable, aka Drew Onyx, as his new, bodyguard, which helped in a little mini feud with Jeff Hardy throughout this summer and fall. Noble got a big win over AJ Styles and Eric Paris in a triple threat match at Mayhem, and then he survived the Cruiserweight Invitational, which could have been like Ilya Skipper, La Parka, Scott Taylor, Sabu, and the debuting Rick Gordy. But, as 2004 said, how long can Jamie Noble hold on to that title with help by Ebony Sable remains to be seen, as we have plenty of rising stars looking to grab it from him eventually. But of course, the other, there's, of course, isn't everybody involved in WCW throughout the year. There's plenty of other wrestlers, that didn't quite have as even though I mentioned him. Of course, Sting was still, like, an important part of the WCW roster this year, even though he wasn't quite as prominent, as basically, after, losing, but he came back, he had a big match against Macias, of which he did the job. He eventually came back, continued feud. He jobbed a Morningstar at Slamboree, but then he got in a little mini feud with Helms Legacy, including Shane Helms, which led to the U.S. title match. We also had DDP eventually leave the company after doing the big job to Kidman, and of course we had other people, rising through the ranks. But like Morningstar, Booker T, of course, had big feud with the Deadpool throughout the year. Jen Drake and Stasiak were part of the tag division, and other wrestlers. We also had the beginning of the storyline of the change of Johnny Ciampa to Jonathan Toro, which was probably not my best. years later. But, in review, this was really, well, this was the first year in TW 2020 officially, after the first 2 years in TW not in TW 16. So, getting used to things, changing over, pushing more people, and this was really the first year of WCW that I truly felt was like the new era of WCW, as we had Eddy Guerrero ending the year as world champion. A big, a huge Starcade, which had this was the lineup for Starcade that year. Of course, it was main evented by Eddie defeating Canyon for the world title. We had Goldberg, of course, ending his feud with Macias for the moment. We had Vampiro getting the big win over Booker and RVD, like I mentioned. We had the first ever Assault of Anarchy match with Arid winning. We had Ray Jr. ending his feud with Shane Helms, getting the big win over him. Chuck Palumbo getting a huge win over Ric Flair. We had Sling Cartier winning the world title. Shawn getting a big win over Mike Awesome, ending his little mini feud with the Rising Triumvirate. Morningstar getting a huge win over Jeff Hardy. And an interesting note for people who are watching the series currently, we had the debut of Monty Brown coming as Steve Ray's replacement to win Saturday Night Control for him. We had Scott Steiner getting, I think, his last real big win in WCW over Gigantes, with Jamie Noble surviving the Cruiserweight Invitational, and we had Kevin and Storm winning the Tag Team Turmoil, defeating Jet and London, who have ran through Silver State Rollers, Yang and Blitz, Shinrek Stasiak, and Jeff Jarrett and Shane Douglas. And we had a big old pre-show battle royal involving people who like Alex Wright, Chavo Guerrero Jr., Dustin Rhodes, Kaz, Conan, Lestat, Tajiri, and others. Of course, Chavo became a big part of the show during the end of the year once Eddie debuted, getting some big matches. And the beginning of the thing where I try to push Chavo, it doesn't quite work out. But all in all, a very fun year, and 2004 will be even bigger, as of course that's the year where WCW moves back to DBS, and we have the debut of Revolution, and lots of other changes to the company. But that's for now, so if you enjoyed this, go and give it a like, comment below, what you like and not liking. Subscribe to the channel. We'll be doing this, hopefully I'll have 2004 up by the end of the week at the latest, and then 2005 and 2006 next week, or even sooner. And then we'll move on to W9, but that's all for now, so talk later, and adios. Have a good one.